Final Fantasy XVI was a really great way forward and truly a really great modern Final Fantasy game. And in my opinion, it's going to be the game we look back on and think, yeah, it really did put the series back on track. But there's been a lot of criticism since Final Fantasy XVI was released. Too many people out there are saying hashtag not my Final Fantasy. Is this warranted? I mean, what's wrong with Final Fantasy XVI? So this is really crazy, but it's been over a year now since the release of Final Fantasy XVI. Enough time has gone by now since rolling the credits on Final Fantasy XVI that I wanted to talk about some of these talking points that people have said online, that this isn't a great game, or it's a press X to win, or this or that, and just kind of figure out what's actually wrong with Final Fantasy XVI, if anything. As always, before we get to that, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy Final Fantasy and JRPG content, and leave a comment down below. Let me know your thoughts on Final Fantasy XVI. I really want to get a good read on what everybody thought about this game or thinks about this game now 12 months after the release. Let's go. As always with these kind of videos, let's summarize the story so that way we have some context for our discussion. Final Fantasy XVI is set in the world of Valistia, a land divided among several nations, each empowered by a mother crystal that grants magical abilities. The story follows Clive Rossfield, the firstborn son of the Archduke of Rosaria, who initially serves as the protector of his younger brother, Joshua. Now, Joshua is the dominant of Phoenix, an icon of fire, capable of summoning and controlling this powerful being. Tragedy strikes when Rosaria is attacked by a rival nation, leading to Joshua's apparent death. Devastated and driven for revenge, Clive embarks on a journey that spans many years, encountering other dominants and other icons along the way. The dominants are individuals who possess the ability to summon and control these powerful beings, and their existence is central to the political and personal conflicts that shape the story. The land is also suffering from a mysterious phenomenon known as the Blight, which causes the environment to wither and die, leading to fierce competition among the nations for the remaining fertile land. As Clive uncovers more about the mother crystals and the true nature of icons, he learns the dark secrets behind the crystal's power and the devastating consequences of their use. Clive's journey takes him through a series of battles and alliances, leading to a final confrontation with the true antagonist who's been pulling the strings behind the scene. Throughout his quest, Clive must face his inner demons and external threats to Valistia, ultimately striving to bring peace and balance to the land by addressing the root causes of the Blight and the misuse of the power of the crystals. So yeah, Final Fantasy XVI offers a more focused and coherent narrative compared to like Final Fantasy XV, which faced criticism for its fragmented story and reliance on external media to fill in the gaps. The storytelling in 16 is a lot more cohesive, with a clear central protagonist and a well-developed plot, in my opinion. It also adopts a darker and more mature narrative tone, with themes of politics, betrayal, and revenge. It's really cool. The story overall is just darker in tone, with a more mature theme, and it's a nice change of pace from the last few Final Fantasies that we've had. The story itself revolves more or less around Clive and his journey, while featuring very strong support characters. By centering the story around Clive, the game allows for a more in-depth exploration of his personal journey. This focused approach contrasts with the ensemble cast structure of some of the previous titles, enabling a more intimate and emotionally engaging narrative, and I really felt that. There was enough time for the other characters to have their moments too. I mean, like Cid, easily the best Cid in the series. I loved Dion. Dion was such a great character. I wish we got more of him. Joshua was a really great and standout character, and so was Jill. All the characters that surrounded Clive and his journey were absolutely excellent, and I loved their screen time. But for me personally, the journey and the character development of Clive was really spot on. To me, it felt like it went back to its roots with storytelling and setting, and there's a lot of elements present here that I feel could have easily been placed in like Final Fantasy IV, for example, and it would have been labeled as a masterpiece back then. So what's changed? Why don't some people see it that way? One last point on the story, and I've talked about this a lot on my channel, but man, the voice acting really just sealed the deal in Final Fantasy XVI for me. Not only did we get a throwback old school vibe for the setting, but all the voice actors really just elevated this game to the next level, in my opinion. Every single character nailed their performance, and I really felt it allowed for me to be in the game, which not many games do for me. And the performance of Clive was just stand out for me. It was enough for me to really question if Clive would overtake Cloud for my #1 Final Fantasy hero. So yeah, Ben Starr, if you're watching this, I would love to have you on my podcast. So please, hey, join me. I want to talk to you. So as far as I'm concerned, the story and the characters were really, really great. I've seen some people complain online about Clive being dry and bland, but I think his character was really, really well developed, especially because you get to see him from 3 different ages, like 10 or 15 or something like that, 28 and then 33. Each point in his life is very pivotal to the progression of the story. It's really well done. The biggest departure from what people know with Final Fantasy XVI is the gameplay. Here we have a real-time action-oriented system, marking a significant shift from the classic turn-based and hybrid systems of previous titles. The only character controllable here is Clive, allowing for a more immediate and dynamic fighting experience. He can perform a variety of attacks, including melee strikes, powerful combos, and special moves that are tied to the abilities of the icons he's defeated or those who have given him their power. Clive can channel the powers of different icons, each granting him unique abilities and attacks. These abilities can be switched in and out during combat, allowing for versatile and strategic fighting styles. This adds a layer of depth to the combat as you must decide which icon powers are best to use in different situations. Combat is really fast-paced and requires dodging, blocking, or countering effectively. Timing is super crucial as well, because if you dodge or counter, it can open up opportunities for devastating counterattacks. Now, one thing I really thought was amazing and breathtaking here was the icon battles, where Clive directly engages in large-scale fights with other icons. These battles are highly cinematic. I loved them. And it was really great combining real-time action here as well with like a visually stunning and mechanically engaging experience. This was really one of the more standout features of Final Fantasy XVI for me, offering something fresh and a really uniquely engaging experience for a lot of players. A lot of people have asked me what Final Fantasy would be great to start with, and to be honest, if you haven't played a single Final Fantasy at all, Final Fantasy XVI might be a really great starting point. It has a very modern feel to the battle system, and that might just be the thing to get people hooked on Final Fantasy XVI, and from there, the world of Final Fantasy. Now, I know some people are upset that the battle system is what it is. Some people would even go as far as to say it's press square or X or whatever to win. And yeah, that's probably true if you're playing with the easiest difficulty on and the timely accessories, which are the rings that change different aspects of combat, which make them easier. If you're watching a challenge, I recommend obviously not doing that. And no, it's not a turn-based game, so just play it for what it is. Since we found out this game was going to have this battle system, people were comparing it to Devil May Cry, and you know what? That's okay. I appreciate the direction for the combat that this game went in, because it was just something different and unique to Final Fantasy XVI. And that's cool. Before we get any further, did you know that 80% of the people that watch my channel are not subscribed? That's a huge number. So if you like JRPG content and Final Fantasy content, hey, hit that subscribe button. I'd love to have you here for my weekly videos. Anyway, on to the next point. Now, in terms of where you can go, I would describe the areas in Final Fantasy XVI to be zones that you can select and then travel within. It's definitely not the seamless world map of like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, for example, which only came out a few months after 16. I personally think that with the story-driven progression, which focuses on delivering a cohesive and tightly woven narrative, the exploration allows for a more focused storytelling approach, ensuring that the narrative remains in control and central and impactful. The game does feature open areas that players can explore, which provide opportunities to engage in some optional content and discover some hidden secrets. However, the main progression is more directed with clear objectives and a defined path to follow. Yes, this is a very linear game. Like I said before, this design choice contrasts with the more open world approach of like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, or even the last entry in the series, which was Final Fantasy XV, which offered a larger, more open-ended environment for players to explore at their own pace. Now, by adopting a more linear structure, Final Fantasy XVI aimed to deliver a compelling and immersive narrative experience with a strong emphasis on character development and plot. So yes, that could be seen as a bit of a miss. Do we have to sacrifice the world that we play in for the sake of the story? What do you think? For what it's worth, I kind of enjoyed the world of Final Fantasy XVI, and I tend to play these games fairly linearly anyway. Okay, so let's get this out of the way, because this is something I discussed a few weeks ago, talking about how Square can save the series, more or less addressing the sales numbers of the game, which is a little more than 3 million as it stands right now. I mean, that's a great number, but is it enough to justify the development costs? It's clear that if people are going to point out the sales as a point of defeat of the game, we also need to factor in that less people have a PlayStation 5 than a PlayStation 4, for example. So my hope is that Square can port this game to PC and make a few extra bucks by doing so. I know I'm down for a second replay on my Steam Deck. What about you? But yeah, even in some of the JRPG Facebook groups that I browse from time to time, and yes, I know that in itself is an issue sometimes, people will get on their high horse and pretty much make fun of the fact that Final Fantasy XVI didn't blow sales expectations out of the water. Based on Square's announcements, I mean, it's doing okay enough, and enough to warrant DLC, which I actually need to go back and play the Rising Tide DLC. If you want some more discussion about the sales in the series, check out my reference video, which I'll leave in the description. But sure, it might be concerning that we haven't heard anything beyond the initial 3 million announcement. And even then, did it just sell that amount from name alone? Did the game really make waves other than just being the next game in the Final Fantasy series? Food for thought. So Final Fantasy XVI was a really great game in my opinion. I think as time goes on, I will see it as one of my clear favorites, maybe even getting into my top 5 eventually. I appreciate it and I recognize the developers for doing something different with Final Fantasy, daring to take risks. Final Fantasy is a series that is often criticized for doing something different, being different than turn-based games that we were used to for like the last 30 or so years. And it's okay to change. I think the best thing that we can do as fans of the series is embrace the change and embrace the series, because more or less the turn-based games are probably done with in the Final Fantasy series, and yes, that is sad, but that's okay, and I'm willing to accept that as a die-hard fan of the series. So if we can enjoy Final Fantasy XVI for being, even if it's not your favorite game, a stepping stone for getting this series back on track. So I love Final Fantasy XVI and I hope you do too. And in my eyes, I don't think it's a failure and I don't really think anything went wrong because it should be appreciated for what it is. And that's a really great standout game. So what do you think? Was Final Fantasy XVI a bad game or a bad Final Fantasy? Let me know. Leave a comment down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit the video here for more content. Check the description down below for my turn-based JRPG podcast coming out every Friday. Thanks for watching.